Death is a lie, it's just energy transfer. Death is a lie, it's just energy transfer. 'Cause we're all alive, it's just energy transfer. We're all alive.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Mind, Body, and Monkh. Today we have special guest, Executive Director at St. Louis Counseling and Therapist to the Stars, Mr. Thomas Duff. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on today.
Hey, it's no problem. I appreciate you coming out.
Yeah.
So just to jump this off, really, we met because you had me on your show, and you were talking, you had a lot of great questions, by the way. I don't think we ever followed back up on that, but I love the questions that you asked.
Yeah.
You dug deep into like why I did my music. You dug deep into the more spiritual aspect of my life. So now I get to turn the tables on you.
Perfect.
So I'm excited.
I'm prepared.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So kind of what got you started? Like what made you want to do what you do today?
Man, with mental health, I had majored in criminal justice to start with. So I was going to go down law enforcement route and everything. And there was an internship that I had to do back in college. And so I ended up just doing it at a children's home and working with kids that had been in trouble with the law. And I just fell in love working with kids at that point. And so it was the ability to, it was still a criminal justice system, but it was the treatment side. So I was able to kind of get to people early, get to kids early and try to make impact.
Right.
And then from there, it's just, understanding that when people make choices, it's not always bad because they're just bad people. They're not bad people. They just had some things happen to them and they went down this road. So for me, that's how it all started. And then it's progressed into, from being a therapist over the years to now this administrative end, which is just as challenging at times. But I like being around people, and I like figuring out how and why people do the things they do. And a lot of that is still in my administrative working with people. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So starting out with criminal justice, did you have any kind of preconceived notion about being a therapist or any counseling before you actually went into it? Or how did your mind change on all that once you dove into the kids' home?
So I kind of grew up, you pull yourself up with the red bootstraps, and mental health you don't talk about, right?
Right.
There's a stigma around that. And so I was more thinking law enforcement side and everything of that side. So I already kind of was looking down a little bit upon therapists, counselors, psychiatrists. And so once I got into that world of so this is the side of kids that I had all these preconceived notions and why they did the things they did. And I had to really kind of change my whole scheme and how I look at things because there's more to it than meets the eye.
Right.
Yeah. So it was hard to get through that, and then I ended up getting a degree in social work, which kind of opened my eyes to a lot more of just the theory and helping people in the community and relationships. And to me, that's what everything is about, is relationships.
Definitely.
Whether it's in the business world, whether it's in the social work world, it's all about relationships.
Definitely. Yeah, and that's the thing, me diving into my spiritual side, I never went to counseling, but as a kid, I had the same kind of idea, if you're going to counseling, then that means something's wrong with you, or that means they're trying to, trick you into doing different things, whether it's, pharmaceuticals or just think something's wrong with you kind of thing. I think that's what I always heard in the back of my mind and what people kind of pushed on me as well. But it's weird because the more I dive into my spiritual plight, the more I realize that gurus and priests and all these different religious and spiritual leaders, that's essentially, they're doing kind of the same thing, depending on, they'll listen to you, you listen to them, and you guys are kind of having this dialogue back and forth. And at least with, things that I follow like Buddhism and Hinduism, it is a self-improvement, self-help kind of process. And to me, it's kind of like the same thing. What would you say about that? Do you feel like there is some type of equal or or difference there?
Oh yeah, I think there's a huge connection. A lot of times, as a therapist to the stars, as you said,
Yeah.
as a therapist, we're working with a person's spirit, right? And who they are on the inside, what makes them up, and a lot of times it's broken on so many levels, whether it be trauma they endured growing up, or life circumstances that have brought them down. And so the spiritual side to a person's counseling, to the therapy side, it is such a vital component, because it's another, there's all these different parts to a person, whether it be their relationships with their family members, their parents, their siblings, their friends, their social supports, and spirituality. But we all believe in something. Even if you don't believe in something, that means you're still believing in something, right?
Yep.
And so I think, in counseling, we make sure, and I've worked, from within a faith-based organization and for a for-profit organization that, is not, that wasn't geared towards any faith-based entity. But there's still a component where we have to talk about that spirit and who you are on the inside, what makes you up.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's something, like I said, that I've found. Kind of turning that back, when I was a kid, I was starting to get into bad stuff. My brother had went into boys' homes and jail and stuff as a young kid too, getting in pretty big trouble. And I was following those paths. It wasn't until he got out and handed me a guitar, actually, that I stopped I focused on the guitar, and I stopped all the bad stuff I was doing, running around trying to, mimic the older kids and stuff like that. And, a lot of times I think opportunity changes. You give somebody an opportunity that they might have not thought that they were either eligible for or even understood, like what, that was even an option in their life. And that kind of changes how they think about things. It's like what you said earlier. It's not necessarily that they're a bad person. It's just that something maybe they're going through, or sometimes they might not think that there's any other choice but to go down this bad path. Did you see a lot of that, like working in your kids' homes and working with children, like a lot of kids that might have just maybe like turned around once they got the opportunity, or something out there changed their perspective?
Yeah. I've worked for a long number of years in residential treatment facilities, and you'd see so many different kids that would come in, and a lot of times, you speak about opportunity, and sometimes that opportunity was getting away from that environment that they were in because there was some type of trauma going on, whether it be community and environmental trauma where they're going to bed at night and they're smelling gunpowder in the air because of gunfire, right? Or abuse and neglect inside the home, whatever it may be. But they would get into these residential treatment facilities, and it was the concept of family. It was the concept of boundaries. It was the concept of let's talk about what's happened, and then the opportunity to get to know those kids, because there were so many the skills, and a lot of times what would happen, I can remember even realizing early on in my career, it's like, you get these kids I was working in Illinois, and they would come to this facility from inner city Chicago and rural parts of Illinois, and until you got to know them, you would not know the level of skill that they have. So you mentioned like music and the guitar,
right?
And it's like, this kid can sing, amazing, just talent. This kid can draw. This kid can write, and whether it be boys or girls, whoever I worked with, you had to take the time to get to know them, because that's what would ultimately help them as a path out. And we would see lots of progress. And then when they would leave, it would depend upon, how old they were, what environment they were going back to, and if they had the ability to be assertive and strong, and taking the skills they learned into that new environment they would go to.
Right. So you would try to kind of focus them towards those skills? Is that what you're saying? Or at least kind of like, hey, mention it every once in a while? Or what was kind of like a technique to bring that light out of them, I guess, so to say.
Yeah. So I mean, it's in the field we call it like a strengths perspective.
Okay.
So you would have, and for me, I find focusing on when I'm working with a kid who may be struggling from a background, putting that emphasis on their strengths and whatever that may be. That may be communication, that they could talk and describe what would happen. It may be art, it may be as you mentioned with music, but taking that and making sure they realize that's a talent they have. Right. Because they weren't usually told that was a talent. Like, that's unique. You become unique with some of these things. Right. That they have. And so focusing on that, making that part of daily conversations, mm-hmm. making that part of what we would call their treatment plan, and making sure that others knew about that as well too, because a lot of times it's building that person up, and not just one person telling them that, but the other peers that they were around, right. as well as maybe the other staff that were working there. But yeah, you would definitely take that and then help them hone that. Because for some, that's a way out. I mean, how many stories have we heard about, artists, musicians, athletes that use that strength yep. to take them to a better situation?
Definitely. Yeah, and it's just like you said, artists and not just children, but adults too, I think need to hear the same difference, Mm-hmm. There's so many people out there that I think, especially at the age of once 18 comes around, high school is ending, college hits their mind or not, they're starting to say, like, what am I good in this, what am I good at in this world, or what's something that I have a strength that I see in, and a lot of people do get lost. And they just kind of end up like not really doing much, and that's when things fall off for them, early 20s, and you fall through, kind of stumble through your 20s. I think all of us do regardless.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what the 20s are
yeah.
for. But like, that is important to, I think, just do that for both children and adults, and, even everybody, really. It doesn't matter the age. You can get lost in your own mind in any portion of your time here.
Yeah.
And it takes that somebody to say, hey, you're really good at that, why don't you keep focusing on that? And then, you know what, maybe I am, and you'll see, as you keep on shining these lights on people, how their perspective on life changes, and how the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they look, just completely changes through that. I've been definitely one of those people that, even though I did a lot with music in my teenage years, I kind of fell off a little bit in my early 20s, and it took some friends to kind of be like, hey, let's kind of help, let's put you back together for a second,
Yep.
And it, I was off and running again thanks to them, keeping me going. What would you say is like one of the hardest things about what you do in your job?
Finding sometimes when, for me, when I've been a therapist, a lot of times you're surrounded by everyone else's problems or issues. And at times it's hard for you to know if you're succeeding or not. And so one of the things, am I making a difference? Right. So as a therapist, am I making a difference? And then you have to look for the very small changes in people, and not only for yourself, to keep yourself kind of going in the field, but for the person as well. Mm-hmm. So acknowledging that any small betterment of well-being, any small improvement is huge. So, sometimes it's for a young person that struggles with maybe self-harming, right? Mm-hmm. And they may self-harm every single day. One way or another, they might be scratching on themselves, they might be cutting on themselves. But if they go 1 hour without doing that, that's huge progress. Yeah. They may go ahead and do it later, right? But that's fine. We'll work through that. But you made progress during that day. And so one, as a therapist, remembering, hey, you know what? For that 1 hour, we kept that individual safe. So I think looking for the small rewards, small improvements, and one, as a therapist, believing that's a good thing. And then two, making sure we point that out for the person as well.
Definitely. So in that, I feel like a lot of people have this thing where it's like, it takes energy to give energy kind of thing. So do you ever kind of feel drained yourself, or like, what are some things you do to keep yourself going, yourself improving through this process?
Oh yeah. Throughout the years, it's been, different jobs I've had and different groups of kids and clients I've worked with, more draining than others at times. And so, in the field, we call it self-care, that, you have to have a good bag of tools for your self-care. So for me, it's been a journey. Early on in my early 20s, I didn't take care of myself. I just worked as much as I could, poured my soul into people. And then all of a sudden I'm like, man, I hate work. I hate coming to work, and you lose that passion. So I think one, you gotta be aware of it. So it's that mindfulness concept, and taking the time to. I'm a big proponent in just breathing. I've learned through time. I don't care if you're in a desk job, if you're an athlete, I think breathing is one of the most important aspects to your day. So for me, it's metaphorically as well as actually just literally breathing is a big part of it. Two, I think making time, the concept of boundaries is really important, that sometimes you just got to shut off the stress or shut off work is really important, because if you allow the two to bleed into each other, work and personal life, they become intertwined, and then you're constantly in a stressor of a world. So finding that safe haven, whatever it may be, it could be a hobby, it could be yoga, it could be exercise, it could be journaling, whatever it is, figuring that out. So for me, it's a combination of things. It's exercise, it's getting out and being social with people, and at times that's hard for me because I'm naturally kind of an introvert. But I know when I'm around people, I get that energy, and then that revives me. And so COVID has been an up and down for me. At times I'm like, hey, this is great. This is like an introvert's dream. Right. I'm not pressured to do anything. And then I realized, I get a lot of energy from a brainstorm around the table with people. So sometimes it's scheduling those, putting those things in my schedule. And because I allow my schedule to dictate my world sometimes, but if I don't put that, like self-care or yoga or massage or brainstorm in the schedule, I let it go.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You said breathing. It's crazy because, like, obviously we're subconsciously breathing all the time. It's how we survive. But it's when we bring it up to our consciousness and our forefront of our mind and focus on it, and obviously slow it down or speed it up. You can notice the difference. If you start breathing faster, obviously your heart's going to start beating faster. Those other things are going to start feeling. You could even cause yourself anxiety with things like that. Breathing slower, it's going to settle you down and calm you. And you said that, and I do the exact same thing. I'm sure many people do. But it's just crazy because to me that is kind of like an ongoing meditation, or like the way that I like to perceive it, at least. It's like that's your ongoing meditation. You don't necessarily have to be sitting, full lotus and oming and stuff like that. You could be driving down the street. You can be sitting just right here. Anything. If you have nerves for a job interview, nerves because somebody might be getting on your nerves. Different things like that. You could stop yourself and you can breathe for a couple minutes. You don't really have to think, and loop unless you want to. But, breathing is definitely that big component of just settling down your body, giving your body that time to just relax, and reset in a way instead of being caught up in that moment, So I love that you said that, because that works for me. Big amount worked for me. Worked for me a lot. Yeah, I mean, what would you say, like I said before, I feel like being a therapist and counseling does have somewhat of a bad connotation to it with people that have not dove into it. We live in such a, American society. We just be tough, like you said, lift yourself off your bootstraps and just work, and, emotion, especially, for men too,
Yes.
Don't have any emotions, don't show your emotions. What would you say to somebody that came into your office that kind of, was like, didn't really want to be there, but they're there? How do you get them in that zone, or what, what would you say to people that are, kind of thinking that that's still in this world?
So I think first I try to assure people it's a trusting relationship. It's a trusting therapeutic relationship. And going to therapy is like telling your secrets to this third-party objective listener that's trained not to judge you. Because a lot of times we don't want to share, even if the people we're supposed to share with, like the people we're closest to, there's stuff we don't want to tell them. And so going to somebody that doesn't have all the baggage with you, that doesn't know your friends or, your relatives, it's this objective listener. And I'm not there to tell you what to do. I'm not to tell you you're right or wrong. What I'm there to do is to listen, and that's a big part of it, is like, I'm going to listen to you. And a lot of times people out there aren't used to that. We're a very talking society. We're a very judgy society. That's another story. But giving that person the chance to just be listened to and heard. And I think that's a huge part of what therapy is. And then from there, it's this, I'm going to join you on your journey. I'm going to be with you. It's a relationship. It's a therapeutic relationship. And I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate with you. Doesn't mean I think you're bad or I think you're wrong or anything like that. But I'm going to just say, let's look at it from this angle. Let's think about it from this person's point of view, where they might be coming from. And it gives that person the chance to kind of explore other ways of thinking in a safe place. We say that's a term that's out there a lot. Where's a safe place?
Right.
And a therapist's office is a really safe place to be your true self. And then once you let that stuff out, I mean, time and time again, what we hear from people, what I've heard from people is like, wow, I've never shared that before. And it feels so good that I got it out and actually verbalized it.
Right.
And sometimes that's what people need. At the same time, it's also to help you realize you're not alone. Because one, you're not alone. I can be with you on this journey, but I can tell you about others, confidentiality, right? But I can assure you that others are feeling the same way you do. And I can even give you examples on how other people feel that relate to you. And then that's usually a big part of it as well too, because people are like, wow, I'm not losing my mind. Other people feel that way. So I think that's some aspects of it.
Yeah, and it's like, it brings to mind something that I read in a Dalai Lama book, Art of Happiness, I believe it was, where a woman goes up to one of the Buddhas, I believe it was Gama, and her son had died. And she was sitting there just like dwelling in her pain and feeling like nobody, could understand her pain. And she was just like, please, relieve me of this pain, Buddha, please. I know you have the power to do this. And what Buddha said was like, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go in your village. I want you to go door to door and ask for sugar from each one of your neighbors. And she was like, okay, I could do that. And he was like, but I don't want you to take the sugar if they had someone in their family pass. And she said, okay, and she came back and she had no sugar, and not only did she have no sugar, she also said, you helped me so much because each door I went to, they had the same story as me, obviously not son, but somebody in their family close to them that had passed, and she was able to pretty much talk to every single one of her neighbors, got to know her neighbors more obviously, and saw that everybody's going through the same process in some way or another, So I do believe too that obviously the feeling of feeling alone in your suffering and your thoughts, brings you to such a dark and deep place, and it does help to show that like everybody kind of is going through the same thing, and it's interesting because like we're all doing it in a sense in my life and what I believe is God's work, but counseling is huge in that respect. It's a huge piece of God's work because essentially that's kind of like who Buddha was. That's who like Jesus was, and Muhammad and Abraham and all of them really like were counselors to their followers, kind of gave them that light, gave them that opportunity, and gave them their own true power to do what they were sent out to do, right? And so like it's just beautiful in that aspect, that you have made that, obviously into your profession, and like you're diving in and helping people the way that you are. There was another thing I was going to say, and it just slipped my mind here.
I know that feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got it. So have you heard of the term shadow work?
Shadow work.
Yes.
No, tell me about that.
It's kind of the same process of like just asking people, to talk about maybe their memories, and it's really essentially like diving deep into really through meditation and through yoga, diving kind of deep into your mind, and past things in your life just kind of show up, traumas, good things, and you're kind of working on your memory, and in turn you're letting that go. Say something happened in your childhood that wasn't necessarily great, you're meditating on this, you're kind of working your way through it, and is essentially letting it go after that. It's a new term. I just started hearing it, but I relate that to being kind of like a self-counseling thing. And it's interesting because I've had this on my mind for a while. Like, I wonder if counselors do shadow work, but it's the same thing, really. It's just kind of like an external way of going about it.
Yeah, and counseling, it's there's no magic to it, and because it's a lot of work,
Right.
you have to do on your own as well too. And when you come in, and some people are coming, once a week, the counseling, sometimes a couple times a month, whatever it may be. But in between that, that's the work, like you're describing that they're doing, and reliving memories and thoughts and writing them down. And then a lot of times you might be bringing those back into the therapist to say, you know what, I did some journaling. I had all these thoughts going on, and I do think when we take time to think, right, and away from the distractions, you got the headphones off, you've got TV off, you got social media, you're not looking at anything. When you take that time to reflect and think, things pop into our head, and maybe it be a memory, or maybe it'd be something you want to improve about yourself. But I think that's the other part of all this, is we have to do that for ourselves. We have to schedule quiet moments in our day. And it's hard for some, right?
Right.
They've got kids and families. You might be a single parent, but sometimes it's 10 minutes.
Right.
And it feels, when I say to people, schedule that time and do some thinking, they're like, I don't have time to do that. But if I say like 10 minutes, give me 10 minutes, that makes an impact. That's a long time to sit and just maybe meditate, to think.
Yep.
It is a long time.
Yeah, and I personally do pretty much 10 minutes, or however long it takes me to go to sleep, right before I go to sleep, just to kind of unwind the day. Not even just kind of go over the day at all, just unwind and dive that back. My technique as far as the meditation goes, and I'm even laying down, I'm not sitting up or anything, but it's closing my eyes and kind of like you see these layers of kind of light, and you focus on your forehead, and you're kind of backing away slowly from each one, and that like helps me so much with relieving my stress of the day, and anything that's on my mind that's going to keep me up, right? So even like you said, even if you have kids and all this and all this stuff going on, a very structured day, you still can take that time right before you go to sleep to just push that stuff out and essentially have that good rest. You're stressed, you're not going to be resting well.
Yeah. Well, it's probably like 10, 15 years ago, because mindfulness, it's a technique we use in therapy as well. And, there's a lot more people more advanced than I am with that. But when I went to like a training, it was when I was living in Illinois, but a training was here. And she was kind of like one of the gurus in mindfulness and working and implementing in counseling. And it was interesting because, like she said, okay, everyone clasp your hands, right? And then however your thumbs ended up, do the reverse. And how opposite that, and how weird that feels. And then she goes, now you just experienced yourself in the moment, or feeling the way the back of your leg is sitting on that chair. Those are like these grounding moments that like I never, ever even thought about or even slowed down enough to think about that. And I've used those couple examples through time with individuals who may be in some panic and in some anxiety and things like that, and how to slow down and just change your mind, you
Right.
know. But it's those little moments
Yep.
that just really just kind of create this interference and maybe into a thought pattern and stuff that is just huge.
Yeah, it's like you said, taking even the little things on, that people are good at, or little goals that people have gotten through. It's the same difference, you know what I mean? It's just like even the little things that we do every day, we don't necessarily realize that we do the little habitual things and whatnot, and focusing on them. And it's just amazing what our minds can do when we start saying, okay, this is good for me, or this is not good for me. Let me change the way I work, accordingly, right? I mean, because either way, we're habitual beings. Everything's going to be schedulized, no matter if we try to or not, right? Unless we're just sitting and doing nothing literally all day, we still even have a breathing pattern that we're going through.
Yeah.
So, either way, you're going to be doing something, but it's nice to necessarily have that in your mind and be able to have a little bit more control over your mind in that process. That mindfulness is what that really essentially is all about. I feel like that, that changed my whole world. In my mid-20s, I started sitting there nitpicking everything that I did. And back then I smoked cigarettes, I did drugs, I did all types of things things weren't even that bad, really, eating fast food and things like that, And today, it's funny because I really appreciate my friends because they've had to go through this with me. 1 week it's like, wait, you stopped this? Okay, well, and they would adjust accordingly to me, and I really appreciate them for that. They were there for me, and I recognize that each step of the way. And but it helped me so much. And now it wasn't really until I started, right before I started this show, COVID was getting to me as well, and I went through a process of kind of self-doubt, I guess, because I was used to playing shows all the time. I was used to being out, doing my thing, and I wasn't able to do that, And so I went through that little bit of a process, but I came out and was like, look how far I've come, though, in the past 10 years, where one little step at a time, through time, just built up to being a completely different person, And I think there's something to say about that, because when people are just deep into their depressive states, they just want it to be gone all the way, And it's like, well, you have these processes you kind of have to go through, I guess maybe some people can wake up one day and be like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, yeah.
But for the most part, you do have to kind of be mindful and see those things in your life that maybe aren't good for you. And sometimes it's harder than not, because those are people around you that are constantly putting you down, and just like you said, your environment earlier, But I'm a test for that. That's why I talk about it on this show a lot, of the things that I did were just small little things that people thought I was crazy of, Stop eating meat, stop eating all types of different stuff, because diet really has to do with mental health too. That changed everything for me. And while I'm on that, how much do you guys talk about diet and as far as counseling and your process goes?
Yeah, I mean, as a therapist, usually if I'm meeting with somebody, right off the bat, I'm talking exercise, sleep, and nutrition. Before we get into anything, those are 3 questions I like to know about. Because with diet in particular, I mean, we know that nutrients are so important for the body. We know what processed foods and kind of like, fast food, you hate saying it, but you live on that. Your body is going to react. It's like a computer. Good data in, bad data out. Same thing.
Right.
With food, it's until you can slow down and you can recognize and look at what you're feeding yourself with, and look at the impact of you're not having any greens. What's that doing to you? Are you having a hard time remembering things? People joke with me a lot, like, did you have greens today? And I'm like, nah, I haven't had anything green. I don't know how long.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it truly does matter what we're putting into our bodies. Because it's, of course, affecting our organs. Yeah. And that's the thing I point out a lot. A lot of times, you can look at a person's midsection, right? And you can tell, like, wow, they must have an unhealthy diet, or they drink a lot of beer, they got the beer belly, and you can look at someone and see that. So why wouldn't there be an impact on the brain?
Right.
You know, if there's that much impact that you can visually see, you know, a person's stomach in that regard, there's going to be an impact on your brain as well too. And same thing with exercise, right? If I am working out my arms and I'm building up my bicep, and you can tell I'm working out, right? Because you can see my bicep. But we can't see that on the brain by doing cognitive work, by doing mindfulness, by exploring who we are and trying to better ourselves. We can't see it, and that's what makes us, I think, sometimes the whole issue of mental health so difficult is because it's all health, right? There's physical health and there's mental health,
Yeah.
but we just can't see the brain and the impact it's having. But you know, we can see the other aspects of that. So,
Right.
yeah, telltale signs.
It's sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's like even just putting the wrong type of gas in a car. You know, and a car is a way easier mechanism than human beings are. You know, but even just putting the wrong type of gas in the car shows that, you know, your car won't run right. So if you essentially are putting the wrong types of food in your system, obviously it's not going to be a day one you're just going to stop and you're not going to be able to move. You're going to be like Tin Man and you know, Wizard of Oz. But like essentially it's going to, through time, change your being, change your thought process. I know, like even like fast food. I even tested myself recently and went back and ate some fast food. I won't say who, but I went back and ate some fast food. And that night, I couldn't tell if it was like just my mind but I felt anxiety out of nowhere. You know, and in my life, like I've worked so much to like anxiety not even be a thing with me necessarily. But like that night, I couldn't sleep or anything, and it was just I was full anxiety. So I was like, boop, you know, like okay, let me go through my processes, get rid of this. But essentially, like, this is the food doing this, and then I got in, you know, kind of reverted back and was like, well, maybe it's my mind thinking it's the food doing this, you know.
Yeah.
But in turn, like, what it did to my body and like it just, you know, it made me feel terrible, and my energy was off. You know, it's like you with any food necessarily, depending on instead of maybe things like turkey or you know, things like that have those chemicals in them, like you get this boost of energy regardless, right? But it's a matter of how long that energy lasts, you know. And I think with fast food you might get some energy, but it's not going to last that long, you know. In turn, if starting your day off with like you said, with greens or plants in general, you know, I have recently made like mushrooms a big part of my diet every day. I'm big on some baby bellas right now. And it just the change, and literally I will eat this meal full of, you know, rice, beans, lettuce, you know, mushrooms, and whatever else I decide, turmeric and whatnot. And it's like I can feel my body just like my energy, my brain is just kind of like, all right, we're good to go, you know. And it's just so amazing on this respect that, you know, 5 years ago I would have been the person that was just kind of like, well, let me go 5-10 hours without something to eat because I can pull it off. I'm invincible. You know, not realizing what it was doing for everything: my skin, my mind, my body, my spirit. So in saying that, man, I appreciate you coming on here today. I feel like we tackled some good stuff. But what would you say, once again, like to somebody that once maybe needs somebody to talk to, you know, is going through things in their life and is afraid that maybe they might not have like the money or the resources, or they're just, you know, they're just introverted and they don't, you know, they don't know how to get started in that process. Like, what would you say to them to kind of help them or maybe lead them to a place of counseling?
Yeah, there's so many different counselors out there, right? So first and foremost, if you try it and it doesn't feel right, and it doesn't mean it won't ever feel right, because you got to have that good connection. So one, don't be afraid to reach out. You can reach us at our website, stlouiscounseling.org. But my agency, there's tons of other agencies out there, from a sliding scale to grants that, you know, in St. Louis County and several of the other counties that surround Franklin County, Lincoln, Jefferson, kids 19 under can get counseling for free. Nothing. Wow. There's a sales tax, children's service tax that's out there. So there's lots of programs out there that people can get help for free. And so don't let money be an obstacle either. And I would say just give it a shot, and 3 times, 4 times, just don't be a one and done, but try to do 3 or 4 times and then see how it feels. And more often than not, you might be talking about some unpleasant things, but it's going to feel good. And you're going to feel like you're trying and you're making a change. You don't have to go through this alone. And that's the other thing. And for all of us out there, start a conversation with somebody. We all know somebody that we may be like, man, something's up. Something's up with that person. We all know somebody.
Right.
But start that conversation, because sometimes, like you said, like somebody might be introverted, or their mental illness may make them so worried or afraid to tell you something, or just the trauma they've been through, but it takes someone else starting a conversation. So start that conversation with somebody by just checking in and just saying, how's it going? I'm just thinking about you. How's it going? And I think that's a big part of it is others starting that conversation. And that's stuff that I really encourage people to do is check in on somebody else.
Yeah. Love that. Love that so much. Well, once again, Tom, I appreciate you coming on Mind, Body, and Monkh.
Yeah.
I know you said your website. Is that the only place that we can reach you?
That's the easiest. You can find myself there. I have an email address that's on there as well, but that's tduff@ccstl.org. But if you go to our website, stlouiscounseling.org, you got to spell out Saint. So stlouiscounseling.org. You can schedule through there, and you can look at our therapists and try to find a good match. Or our number is there, and one of our intake specialists will talk to you and try to pair you up with a therapist that meets your needs.
Love that. And you also have a really amazing Facebook page, St. Louis Counseling. Like he said, you have to spell out the Saint. But you have, episodes coming out, weekly or daily?
Yeah, Mental Health Matters is
Mental
the
Health
podcast.
Matters, yeah.
Sometimes I forget about that, but I love that podcast because that's how we met, and
Yeah.
it's just conversation. But yeah, we try to do weekly. Sometimes it's more like 3 times a month, but it's really just conversation, and we're trying to break down stigma and just start conversations.
Yeah, I love the stuff you've been talking about. You've had all types of different people on there from what I've seen so far, hitting on very important subjects. Everything.
Yeah.
And so that's where it was just kind of like, you know what, they get it. You guys get it, really, what's really going on. You're not really, I don't see anything that, not that I was nitpicking you guys or anything, but
That's great to hear, though. Yeah.
Right, that you guys understand everything that's going on in this society and today in this world, and are putting a watchful eye on it and helping out. It's really amazing.
Awesome.
So once again, I appreciate you coming on. And for those guys out there listening, have a great day.